Good morning, everyone. Today is Monday. How are you, sir? Today's Monday, as I said, June 29th, 2020. The time is 9 a.m. We're continuing our assessment appeal hearings. This is, in fact, a special meeting, and I am officially calling this meeting to order. Attending are Commissioners Duncan, Brooks, and Fillios. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Not likely. Okay. So our first appeal is, in fact, an oral appeal by Mr. Joseph P. Welk. It's AIN 109314, and it's appeal number 20-373. And this is an oral hearing, sir, so I will read the rules of play, which is actually the law established by the state of Idaho. So the purpose of this hearing is to consider an appeal on the assessment placed by the assessor's office on the subject property. The decision of the board will be based on equalization of market value, not on taxes. The taxpayer shall have the burden of proof in seeking affirmative relief. A preponderance of the evidence shall suffice to sustain the burden of proof. Some of the information provided in the packet distributed by the assessor may contain copyrighted information. Further disclosure of this data is prohibited. The timing of this hearing will be limited. The appellant will go first and will be allotted approximately 10 minutes to provide evidence which supports their case. The assessor will then also be allowed up to 10 minutes to state their case. The board may ask clarifying questions before moving into deliberations. No testimony will be heard during deliberations. The clerk will now please administer the oath to all participants. The reason you're taking the oath of office, sir, is because this is considered a quasi-judicial hearing. Tina, please.
Please raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give in the issue pending before the Kootenai County Board of Equalization shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Okay, you have 10 minutes. Proceed.
Well, I don't have a whole lot to say because obviously prices are going up here anyways. Houses are going up. But what I've basically noticed is when you guys changed assessors, it seems like your assessments have gotten a little more aggressive. In the last few, what I've looked at, it's like I realize my house value is going to go up. People are moving here. There's nothing I can do about that. But in 5 years, 4 years of owning the place, and this is the 5th year, I mean, I have papers for you guys that said to bring copies for each of you so you can look, but it significantly has gone up. The last 3 years, every assessment is, I mean, $20,000, $30,000 more than, and before that it was, like I say, I have the numbers there, but before that was at least half that. And it seems like with the change of the assessors, maybe it got a little more aggressive. And I realize it just changed again, but there's just no way for a single homeowner to catch up when prices are raising that much every year. No, I have one for me, thanks. You guys said print 5, so they're for you. And, you know, in 5 years, 4 years, my house is depleted more. It's not like I'm upgrading the thing. I don't have the money to do it right now. I'm just first-time homeowner. Meanwhile, the price is raised almost a third in value. And I find in 4 years, that's pretty aggressive.
So how much do you say it's gone up in 4 years?
$100,000.
How much of an increase is that?
The value of the house?
No, your taxes.
It's been, well, I didn't realize taxes were an issue, but it's been $333 is how much my taxes have gone up in the last 3 years.
Okay, so back up. Your valuation has gone up how much?
It's sitting there, about $100,000 in the last 3 years, pretty close to it. I mean, that's a third of the price of my house. More than a third. And with rates going down, I figured, you know, I had like a even battle for a little while to get ahead on my debt. But with prices going up like that, like you can see there, it's pretty amazing. So that's why I printed the paper off. Besides that, I really don't have much more to say because I'm aware that property is going up around here and that's just the way it is. But just wanted to bring to your attention that it seems a little aggressive right now.
Do you feel like you could sell your house for $265,000?
No. Sure, if I bought it, put new countertops and flipped it like people do, but I haven't. I've bought it planning to live there for a long term. So, yeah, if I had the money to invest and did all that, eventually I could, but not right now. No, I don't think so.
Do you want to talk about the comps you provided?
I mean, there are comps from, Coeur d'Alene Avenue, kind of around within a half mile, a mile. I realize they're kind of all over the board, but it's a comparison of, older houses that aren't, I don't know how to explain the comps. I mean, they're there. If you guys have looked them over, I'd like to hear your opinions on them. I'm not a realtor, I'm not an attorney or anything, so I'm just kind of coming in with info like that. And like I say, my main thing is just what I presented to you guys is those numbers. I don't know what else to say at this point.
Does anyone have any other questions for Mr. Welk? Okay. Take it away.
Okay, Robert Scott for the Kootenai County Assessor's Office. No doubt the market is up. I'm not sure if you're aware of how much. We'll talk about that a little bit. Let's begin with his home.
May we have?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we need our packets.
Thank you. Snuggle up to that mic a little bit.
Yeah,
Okay,
please.
I'm not in it. Good. Thank you. Let's turn it. So page one, the data on the subject property. It's fairly typical for the area. It's in GO 4027, which is, most of the homes in there are 40s, 50s ranchers. There's a mix of homes. And his is, if you could pick a typical home for that area, his fits that profile. It's a 1,096 square foot rancher, single level home, over a full basement that's partly finished. It's got a one-car attached garage, and in addition to that, it has a 30 by 30 heated shop in the rear. He purchased it for $183,500 in 2016. Our 2017 value was $182,320. So our value was good at that time. If you turn to page two, this is GO 4027. So we value all the homes in this area. We move with the market in this area every year. Goes from the cemetery north on Government Way up to Emma and then over to North.
Now, why is that, just for
Well,
everybody's edification?
yeah.
Why is that every year and some areas are not every year?
Well, I say every year, we look at it every year. If the market's moved in that area, we
Right.
will move it, we'll move values. So a geoeconomic area is an area that moves with the market. All the homes in that area would move similarly. And over time, we've been able to identify areas of the city, and we've got about 100 geos for our district, which is all of the Coeur d'Alene, city of Coeur d'Alene. And each one of those is its own real estate market. This is why we do this, because we see definite differences between areas of the city. We have different land values, we have different home values, improvement values. And so every year we look at those areas, we look at what's going on in the market there, we look at the sales, we compare them to assessed values, and we come up with what's called a market adjustment. And that will bring those homes either up to market or down if it's in a declining market. We go the other direction too. A lot of people don't believe that, but we go the other direction too. And sales are telling us, values are down, we're pushing values down. So in this area, we had a small change in the market there, and so we did raise values a little bit. Page 3 is our spreadsheet that shows all the sales for this geo. We had, the geo's 440 parcels. We do mass appraisal. We're moving all of these values at one time. We had 23 sales within the geo. Our median, which is the median sales price to assess value ratio, is what we look at to judge whether or not we're doing a good job. That's the 90 to 110% number that we talk about a lot. When all of our analysis was done and all of our adjustments were made, we were at 90.97% within this range of
So in the
sales.
low range
We were, yeah,
of
very low.
what you could have been at.
Right. Yeah, we can be anywhere from 90 to 110 at the midpoint of these sales. That's our the way we judge whether or not we've done a good job with these sales. If you move on to page 4, these are 4 sales within the geo, and they're data, very comparable sales. I use these also in my comparison that we'll get to a little bit later. Again, on just these 4 sales, we were at 91.74% of value, so, or sales price. So good numbers there too. Page 5 is the location of these properties within that geo. You can see they're all very close by. Page 6, 7, 8, and 9 is the data for each of those properties. And if, even just looking at the photos, you can see that they're very, very similar. Page 10 is our sales comparison grid. So I took these 4 sales, those 4 comps, adjusted them with typical adjustments that a fee appraiser would use. And when all was said and done, we see a range of value from $259,764 to $328,423. We've got an assessed value this year on this property of $265,140. And our best comparable number 1, values out at $275,174. So I indicate on the comparison the value of $275,000. We've got, you can see minimal adjustments on that comp, only $3,000 on a $272,000 sale. So that's a pretty good match to the subject.
What is it that, how long you been doing this?
7 years. 7 years.
And what qualifies you to make these kind of judgments?
8 years in real estate, 7 years as an appraiser, and I'm a licensed appraiser for the state of Idaho.
Okay, so you've got some experience and qualifications.
Yes,
A lot of experience.
quite a bit,
Okay.
quite a bit. And I also draw upon the experience of our whole office.
Well, and does it have anything to do with us switching to assessors?
No. We work strictly from the data, from the sales from the previous year, and so whoever's in a position of leadership has no influence on that. The range that we work within, that's required by statute. All of the adjustments that we make, we have to pass what's called a ratio study every year, which is where they take all of our data, and they do essentially what we do on that spreadsheet, only in a much larger scale, looking at all of the properties that we've dealt with throughout the year, and they check their, our final ratio on that, and we were just above 90% for all of our sales in the county this year. And so that's the state's check on whether or not we're doing an effective job putting values on these properties.
And what happens if we don't value at that 90% rate?
I've heard that the state will come in and value them at 100. Yeah.
Okay.
Bob, I have a question for you. Have you looked at Mr. Welt's comps?
I did, actually. Yeah, I looked at each one of them. The 2019 ones, he provided a number of properties that sold or were in the area, actually. And unfortunately, most of them are not good comps. Some of them are in different geos, smaller square footages. Some have, there's just a difference in each one. And so I came up with my own set of comparables, what I felt were true comps. And, I appreciate all the homework you did, because it's not easy for someone that doesn't do this daily to pull this together. And just, if we were talking about market changes, so the Multiple Listing Service provides stats every year. In 2015, they showed an 11% increase in properties within the city. That's an 11% change in the median price. And that was $215,000 in 2015. 2016 was 10%. 2017 was another 10%, and the median was up to 260. 12% in 2018.
That's
The median's now 291. And 13% for 2019 for the city of Coeur d'Alene. The median price was $328,000.
So that's 50%,
Yeah.
uncompounded.
Yeah, significant change in the market.
So for my home, we got one of those nice letters from the State Tax Commission, said, fix it, or we're going to come in and make it for 100%. And so I already knew it was coming. So my house raised 70,000 last year, 50,000 this year. So 120,000 in 2 years. Can I sell my house for what the assessor says it appraises for? Absolutely, probably then some. So it's one of these things where we're just in the tide. We're just swept up, and there's not a whole lot.
Where is your house and how new is it?
It's a 97, and it's in, it's north, like Rathdrum.
Okay, mine's 50 years younger or 50 years older and a little aged, but.
What's fascinating, and I'm not as active as I was, but I was in the real estate business for, I don't know, before taking office, about 10 years. I also do hold an appraisal license, but I hear the stories from my wife, who does both, and she's been appraising for 35 years. We have seen some properties literally double in the last 4 years, which far exceeds the average, because the average was 50 uncompounded. But if I look at your situation from 15, I'm looking at the 163.4 to 265, and you're right, it's about a $102,000 increase. I don't have a calculator in front of me, but that's about a 60% increase, which if we took the 50% and compounded it, you're right in there with the market.
Now, the good news is, because Kootenai County's values are so high, the tax base gets spread out. And this board is trying desperately to do a 0% tax increase this year. So your taxes may not necessarily go up. They could stay the same, they could go down. I'm expecting mine to go up just because the value went up. And so then my share, increases. But it's not necessarily one for one. So.
I mean, it's great news if you're in the selling market, but when you're
Yes.
when you're buying a house to live in it and try and work and pay it off for your life, it's hard to get ahead when
That's true.
when the market's based on people coming in and buying houses. I mean, it's getting a little out of control.
And to Commissioner Duncan's point, last year the legislature tried to reform the tax structure. They weren't really reforming, well, I guess to some degree they were, and they were talking about capping the tax increases. Now, we're talking valuation here. Unfortunately, if they're going to try to do that, at some point, they're going to have to attack the whole valuation structure, which means looking at something like a Proposition 13 type thing. Apparently, it was passed by the legislature, I believe, some years ago in the state of Idaho, and if I'm not mistaken, the governor vetoed it, is that right? And so it never came to fruition. But I think what you're really saying, and what some other folks are saying, is as long as we continue to peg assessments to actual market value, there's going to be a problem, because eventually people are not going to be able to keep up. But that's something I expect the legislature, when they go into session in January, they're going to be taking that up.
It's not something that we can do.
We can't affect that.
Yeah, I am of the mind that it's just like, it should be like capital gains. My house goes up $100,000 in value this year. I don't see that money, and it's real darn difficult to justify, and it goes up another $50,000 the next year. I don't see that money, but it would be okay with me if when I sold it, then I had to come up But the difference.
Sure, it's all based on if and when you sell it, but what
Yeah.
about the people that don't have that in their
Yeah,
mind to
you don't
buy
have-
and
And
sell?
that's a
I mean,
valid point.
You don't see that money.
Right.
So I sympathize, I think fellow commissioners sympathize, but there's not a darn thing we can do about it, except to make sure that, as was pointed out, that you're at the 90% instead of the 110%. It's the best we can do.
Any other questions from the board?
Just that, with what I presented today, I would ask you to affirm our value for 2020 of $265,140 on this property.
Mr. Welk, do you have any further questions for the assessor?
Not at this time. You mentioned something about assessing the houses all across all markets, and I feel like it's really hard to just say, you know, even the houses that you had in there were all north of my house. Just, it's hard to, I don't know, to just have all the houses assume the same. Everything's not the same in the town, you know. There's old houses that are falling apart. There's,
We
I don't
can
know.
acknowledge that, and we have that in our data. You know, we
Yeah.
have Old homes that still look like old homes have been valued like old homes.
sure,
And I mentioned the geo because that's actually really critical to what we do.
right.
If we didn't do that, there would be a really big disparity between values. So we've broken the county down into these markets, and we have to look at them completely separately. There are areas of town where you can go across the street and you're gonna pay more for a house just because it's in another geo. And we prove that statistically with this data every year. And we actually saw areas of town, this came up a lot this year, East Sherman, in an area that was close to McEwen Park. We had homes down at the end of East Sherman that we raised assessed values on from $200,000 to over $300,000. The reason for that is people were paying extremely high prices down there. They want to be down there. They were buying 900 square foot homes for $300,000.
So you raise because people will pay those prices, or because the value of the property is
Because
going up?
that becomes the value.
That becomes the
definite
value. That's the
value
market.
Is what someone, you know,
Is what-
buyer and seller agree on for a price. And so we actually had to move those properties into another geo in order to get them up to that plus at least 90% of sales price, or we would have been out of compliance on those homes. We would have been treating them unfairly as well as their neighbors. And so we had to bring those in, and we had a barrage of phone calls because these people saw their property values just skyrocket. But everything we saw in this pattern said, we have to move these properties into that geo. So we shifted the geo lines, and this comes up from time to time. We've seen it several times in the last few years because of these extreme markets. You know, downtown is red hot. The east end of Sherman has been changing almost every year, and we've had to make these geo changes at least 2 times now in the last 5 years to keep up. Yeah,
This is
absolutely.
Cori Murrell.
Go ahead, Corey.
Just as an example, so people can't afford to be in the garden district any longer. So our median sale price there is over $400,000 now. So what that does is it shifts the market to where you live. People are going north a little bit, and people are moving to the east end of Sherman because now it becomes the more affordable location. But it's still an increase in your neighborhood where I live also. And then what they call the East Sherman District. So that's what it drives we're responding to the market. So the changes have already taken place. We just respond to it. And we can see those shifts, and that's why we do follow them. And we do put, like, so you're in the medical corridor is what it's called now. And values have gone up dramatically. So just like it used to be the garden district, the average buyer can't afford to be there any longer. So they're going to the medical district and the East Sherman district. So those prices are coming up. And we're responding to it just to meet code.
Right, so
We
it's,
we follow it very closely, though, and have
Make,
plenty of sales to support the changes.
We make the minimum, typically the minimum adjustment just to get above 90%. We try to be conservative, and I think we're successful with that. You know, other properties are a little bit higher, a little bit lower. They're still going to be within the range typically, but that's due to, you know, we're not completely sure about the interior of the home. You know, we're making some estimations from the street when we're there about its level of updating and things like that. So, you know, it's an opinion of value. It's not an exact science. That's why the state has given us a range to work within. You have 2 fee appraisers doing appraisal on a home. They won't match. They're going to be off from each other. But the way we measure things, the way we look at our values and how we measure what we've done makes it fair for everyone.
And realize what's going on in the market. Historically, and by that I mean if you go back several years, 30% of the market is cash. Cash buyers come in, typically do not order an appraisal, so there's a good chance that they're inflating the prices. And I've heard some estimates in one of the more recent months, so over 50%. When you get cash buyers, they push the market. Some will buy houses, and if you've seen, tear them down and rebuild. And those become comps. They could be unrealistic, they could be off the wall. If a house is worth 400 and somebody pays 5, that's a comp. If it's an arm's length transaction, and this is what's going on here. And I think maybe that's another reason that the legislature needs to take a look at it and say, wait a minute, if we're going to tax people, well, let's face it, it's ultimately about taxation, all right? But the fact is, if we're going to value properties and base the taxes on the valuation and on market value, eventually, to your point, you price people right out of their homes.
On that note, that's why it's hard to pull comps comparable to mine, and I mean, there are no comps comparable because everything's skyrocketed, so it's like, okay,
It's moving around.
it's tough to do.
Anyway, on that note,
I
Yeah.
move that we finish public testimony and enter into deliberations.
I second the motion. Aye.
Aye.
aye. Any comments?
No.
Motion?
I just think that it's, you know, they're following the state law. And so it's painful for all of us, but, yeah.
Okay, then.
Yes, and my taxes are too high too. And my valuation is too high too. It is. And
Just try and slow it down a little, that's all.
And I'll add to
Please.
that, we rent our daughter's home in Cougar Gulch. She lives in Australia. She has 10 acres. Her land value went up 100,000 last year.
Sure. Built a house out there.
And no homeowner's exemption because it's considered an investment property. So she's, never mind that. Anyway, let's
Your
go.
rent's going up.
Yes.
Yeah, but guess who's paying it? Anyway, okay.
I move that we affirm the value placed by the assessor's office.
I second the motion.
Bill Brooks,
Aye.
Aye.
Chairman Fillios,
Aye. And for appeal number 20-373, the BOCC affirms the assessor's determination of value.
Now, is there any other venue for him to?
9:28, meeting adjourned. But go ahead.
Well, and if you don't agree with our decision, the State Board of Tax Appeals would be your next option to go to.
And they come up here. They schedule time up here, and they can hear your case.
All right,
I have those forms if you need to fill out right now.
sure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much.